Hello, everybody. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday night, at least on the East Coast. On the West Coast, I'm told that you are coming to me from the past. Is that correct, Pat?
Correct. About 3 hours in your past.
Yes. So this, of course, is Starfleet Tactical. I'm Chris Weuve. I have with me Starfleet Tactical co-founder Patrick Doyle, who is in a hotel. I don't even know if I know what city you're in. What city are you in?
I landed in Portland, Oregon, and I am in Vancouver, Washington, just across the river from the airport.
Okay. All right.
And I now know where Vancouver is.
Vancouver, Washington.
Yes. So Vancouver, Canada is still a mystery, but apparently I go there in a few weeks.
Okay. In related news, there's Vancouver, Washington. I had no idea that there was Vancouver, Washington. So, but Pat was available to tag in for the 200th anniversary show. This is indeed the 200th anniversary or 200th episode. When I'm saying 200th anniversary, it's not the 200th anniversary. It's the 200th episode. I should have gone back and looked at exactly when the very first episode was, but then there's a question like, do you start with the first one that's called Starfleet Tactical? Do you start with any of the ones before that where we were on the show? I don't know what the right answer to that is. But in any event, I decided that, first of all, this is going to be a question and answer show. Astute observers of the show know that I do question and answer shows. One of two things generates a question and answer show, generally. One is we haven't had one in a while, and it's an opportunity to sweep up stuff. Or I'm really busy, and I don't have an obvious topic that I can go, that I feel real strongly about going and doing all the stuff necessary to make it happen. And I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do for a topic, especially since I'm going to be off for a little bit after this. And so it just seemed like it was a good opportunity to do a question and answer show. So think of questions that Pat and I can answer. And then in addition to that, since it is the 200th episode, it probably made sense to do like a state of the channel, state of the show. So I've got some thoughts on that. To be honest, I haven't even shared them with Pat, but I've got some thoughts on it and some slides to go along with it, et cetera, et cetera. So Pat, I know that you had a long day. Is there anything about your long day that you'd like to talk about?
No, not particularly. I mean, it's actually, it's not that unusual of a day. I just happened to share a few details with you. That's all.
Yeah,
all of that is fairly typical stuff.
I will leave out all the details with the exception of having a short turnover, getting to the front of the line at Smashburger, really wanting, a burger, just, the burger that you want would just be the thing to fix the day that you were having. And, oh, I'm sorry, sir, we're out of that.
Yes. You go to a burger place and they're out of burgers, but that's
it's
living on the road. That's living on the road.
I remember Arius Kaufman at one point when he ordered prime rib, and they only had, he wanted it more you don't have prime rib well done, right? But he wanted it a little bit more done than they had it. And they said, I'm sorry, we don't have that. And he just looked at the waiter and said, you do make it here, right? Because can't you just put it in the oven for a little bit?
Yeah, you do have ovens, right? You have a cook.
Apparently that isn't the way that worked. So the idea that a burger place, it's not like you ordered something esoteric. It was like a bacon cheeseburger, right?
Yeah, a bacon cheeseburger. Apparently that was a bridge too far today. But it is very common, for those who travel a lot might understand, that every now and then you get to the thing you're looking forward to in the airport, restaurant, vending machine, whatever. For me, it's the farmer's fridge sometimes that you see that they have meals in there. And lo and behold, everybody's out of the one thing you wanted. And you used up your available time with which to go get something by standing in that line and stuff. So So yeah, there are frustrations that come with traveling a lot.
I will honestly
if
say
you travel a lot, you'll encounter them a lot.
I'll honestly say the only thing that I look forward to at the airport is the exit.
Yeah, I get that.
But oh well. All right, let's see. I do not have my slides ready because I was having all sorts of audio issues, really weird audio issues. Audio settings that worked for the previous 199 episodes decided to fail today, which is why I'm wearing the headset. And so in the process of doing everything, I rebooted the, closed out of StreamYard, et cetera, and then had to bring my slides back up. So let's go through and talk about the slides, and then I'll take questions at the end. But throw questions in. Dustin's already got one. How can a bacon cheeseburger be a bridge? Well, it was a double bacon cheeseburger, right? Did it have the little?
Thus, your question exemplifies my level of frustration at Smashburger. It didn't seem like I was asking for too much.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. All right, let's go through some slides.
But that's airports half the time, or feels like it to me, but very frequently they're out of the one thing you want. So
you have more samples than I do.
I have a few more samples, yes.
Yes. So, okay. So, all right. So here's the agenda and the admin and the bottom line up front. The bottom line up front is the show continues. So, I know that sometimes when you say the future of the show, there's lots of clickbaity headlines where it's always like the future of the thing, the future of the show. Well, the future is we're going to continue doing it. Okay. So I want to get that off right away. There's nothing like I'm not here to announce that I'm done or anything like that. I'm continuing to do it. I'm continuing to have fun doing it. I have lots of ideas about the show. I have ideas for topics. I have ideas for making it better. I have ideas for other things that I might want to do as well. Realistically, the big issue that's always been with this is the level of effort that I'm able to put into the show. Sometimes it's just that, I'm not a spring chicken anymore and I run out of hours in the day. Sometimes I get really busy at work. There's been a few instances, those who've been around for a while may recall that I was hard down for like 6 weeks at one point because my blood thinner tried to kill me. And it took a while to get back to the point where I could do a show, where I had the stamina to put a show together and then actually do it. I worked from my bed for about a month after that, once I was able to even work at all. And so, that's been the main limitation. I've had a lot of ideas for a long time. Pat and I have talked about ideas, and part of it is I have a tendency to kind of want to be a little methodical and think things through. But part of it is just that, time is a precious commodity. I don't necessarily have a whole lot. Tonight, we're going to look at the past, the present, the future, and then do some Q&A stuff. Schedule-wise, this is going to be the last show until maybe the 19th of September. It may not be the 19th, it may be the 26th. Assuming I'm good to go on the 26th, then and that should say 26 September, not 26 set on. My default assumption is that I'll be good to go from that point on. But the thing about having abdominal surgery is that, and I know this from past experience, not the first time I've got stabbed there, is that you can stand, you can walk, you can lay down. The one thing you can't do is sit. Sitting is hard. Sitting is hard and painful. And sitting is what you end up doing to put a show together, and what I end up doing when I'm doing a show. And so if I can't sit, I can't do a show. So it'll take a little bit of time to get better from that. So yeah. Let's see. I'm looking at what Wright said. Wright said that he celebrated his birthday today. By the way, happy birthday. It was actually a couple of days ago, but happy birthday, Wright. by showing a Star Trek double feature. That is the right way to do it, because he works at a theater and you got to show a Star Trek double feature. I think that's the right way to do it. Okay, so let's talk about the past. Some of you have been around long enough to know how Starfleet Tactical started. It was an accidental COVID project. It's during COVID. Alec was doing Axonar After Dark on Saturdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, and he was also doing it on Wednesdays, I believe, at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I listened to the show on a frequent basis, or listened or watched the show on a frequent basis. And at one, I knew that he had guests on and stuff. And at one point, I'm just laying on my couch with my cat, reading a book, and my phone pings, and it's Alec sending me a message. And he says, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I looked at my phone and I went, "Alec's looking for a guest for his show tonight." And so I responded, "Hey, I'm doing great. How about you?" Blah, blah, blah. We went back and forth a little bit. And then he said, "Hey, what are you doing tonight? Would you like to be on the show?" And so I came on the show, and we spent 90 minutes talking about Warhammer 40K on a show called Axonar After Dark. He invited me back for the next Saturday. I don't remember what we talked about the next Saturday, but I was on the next Saturday too. And then the Wednesday after that, I got a message. It may have actually been from Lissa saying, "Hey, are you available tonight to do the show?" I don't remember who the message was. I don't think it was from Alec, but it was from somebody saying, "Hey, are you available?"
It might have been me.
Yeah, I think it was actually saying, "Are you available tonight to do the show?" And it's like I was getting up at dark 30, and even though it was COVID, I was still working from like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning on. And I said, it's kind of a little late for me, because I would end up being up until 2 o'clock in the morning back then when I was doing the show at 10 o'clock. And I said, "But I know a guy. He's a commander in the US Naval Reserve. He's an airline pilot in his day job. He is a fellow member of BuNine, and he also, has a science fiction game. He's a science fiction game designer. So yeah, I know a guy." And so that's how Pat ended up on the show. So Pat did the Wednesday night show, and then Pat and I did the Saturday night show, and then Alec changed the name of the show to Starfleet Tactical, said, "Here you go, it's your show now," and walked away. At no point did he ask either Pat or I if we wanted to take over the show.
Well, I think we had we already talked about doing something like that?
I don't think we really had.
Realized? Okay.
I mean, I think we might have talked about it after we were on the show together.
I think we chatted a little more about it. Yeah, but you're right. Definitely an accidental project. I was at home one night by myself, and I get a call, I think I don't know if you gave me a warning that Lissa was going to call me, or that she just called me and explained who she was. So after being convinced that this wasn't some sort of elaborate gag of some sort, or then yeah, came on the show, and I think Alex and I chatted on the show. So
yeah, and so it worked out well. Largely, the show has been something that we made up as we went along. We never really had a mission statement. I would argue that we kind of have a mission statement now. It took us about 100 episodes to really sort of define what the mission statement was. Yeah, that's Alyssa saying she was connecting with a lot of people for shows at the time. We never had like a style guide. And so if you go back and you watch the old shows, you'd see that the style on the slides, for instance, was all over the place. And it's kind of settled on something, but it's still a little bit all over the place. So, didn't really sort of think that stuff through, was mostly concentrating on the content piece of it. Because this is not the only thing I do on YouTube. I also run a wargaming conference that runs in April of each year. And my attitude for both has been like, the thing about putting stuff up on YouTube is you can kind of do the marketing after the fact. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the first thing first is to generate content. And so that's not just a chasing the algorithm thing. It's like, hey, there's people that are going to show up at 10 o'clock or now 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. I should have stuff ready for them. So content has always been the number one thing, and things like style guides and making it all organized has been not at the top of the list. So over the years, we've done a little bit of everything. We talked about Star Trek and other science fiction and naval history and a little bit of current events and interviews with people, and talked about games, and kind of did a read along. We certainly did watch alongs, stuff like that. We've been all over the place. We've had some guests come on. The one thing we've never explicitly done is tried to chase the YouTube algorithm. There's a lot of things that we do that just don't fit in with the algorithm. Like, for instance, having the same logo each time. We don't put in clickbaity headlines. We don't put in clickbaity logos. I want people to be able to sort of look, when they do a search, look and go, yeah, that's it. I recognize the logo. So we very specifically haven't played the YouTube game there. We also haven't really increased the production values. It's still something I sort of hack together on my computer. I have another camera that in fact, I think I have a better microphone. In fact, I know I've got a better microphone. One of these days I'll find it. Maybe I'll get it set up. I was hoping to have a little bit more space in my office after I moved than I actually ended up with. So this is the desk I work at. I don't have a separate space that is just my YouTube space, because I don't do enough stuff on YouTube to do it. This is my work stuff. My work computer is right there. My personal computer is right here. The work computer is also a laptop. I'll take it to the office on Monday. I always tried to put in enough effort so that I don't look at it afterwards and say, yeah, I just phoned that in. There's a few times, like I said, if I do a question and answer show, sometimes that's an admission that I just don't have an idea in my head. There are times where I've actually canceled the show because I didn't have an idea in my head. I'm trying to think of what I meant by silo ourselves. We never went to the part where we just sort of said, like, we're only going to do this one thing, right? We kind of, like, if something trips our trigger, we've gone off and done it. And so we've talked about Babylon 5, we've talked about Star Trek, we do this, we do that, we do the other thing, For a show called Starfleet Tactical, there's been some issues some episodes that don't have a whole lot about Starfleet, don't have a whole lot about starships, and certainly weren't tactical. So
there were definitely a lot about Warhammer as well.
Early on, especially, and whenever Alec shows up, Warhammer always makes an appearance, because Alec and I go back in Warhammer a long ways. I go back to like 1989-ish, and he goes back to about 1991-ish. So we were both kind of not quite present at the creation, but almost.
Lovingly, everything I have learned about Warhammer has been through osmosis down my throat.
Yeah. It's like I often say, everything I know about the Kardashians, I learned against my will. So that's kind of what the past has looked like. Pat, anything that you want to add to that? You were there for most of this.
No, it was it was a lot of fun. We, just kind of thinking through I primarily did episodes on something that had to do with starship combat or something like that. And I enjoyed those, and those were a lot of fun. For me, post-COVID, Saturday night was too difficult, because with my job, I'm either like, the only reason this is working is because I'm here for 33 hours in the hotel. Normally, if I am, my trips tend to be either super late I get in and get done super late at night, so I'd be flying till 2 a.m, or they start super early, in which case I'm going to be in bed by now, because I have to wake up at 3 a.m. So
it is not unusual for me to have like an hour-long conversation with Pat on a Saturday. It's just I have it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe a little bit later. But it always culminates with Pat saying, well, I got to go to bed now because I have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to fly. And for me, I can just tough it out. He is under a legal restriction. And as somebody who occasionally is in the back of the airplane, I support that law.
Yeah. Yep.
So thank you for not killing your passengers.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay, so let's talk about the present a little bit. So eventually we kind of settled on a formula. So in this basically, this is how I describe the show. If anybody says, what's the show about? I say, on any given episode, it usually falls into one of two categories. It's usually either a science fiction show with some naval history and naval operations thrown in for flavor, or it's a show on naval history or naval operations with some science fiction thrown in for flavor, right? So usually it's either like, hey, this is a battle cruiser in Star Trek. Let's talk about it and its design, et cetera, with a little bit about battle cruisers thrown in. Or, hey, let me tell you about battle cruisers. And oh, by the way, these different science fiction properties have battle cruisers. And here's how it might change, how it changes in those science fiction properties. And so there's a lot of, that's going to continue. Those are the type of shows I like to do. And that fits in because my fandom superpowers, I can talk about real world navies and science fiction navies at the same time. And I know some other people who can do that too. Pat can do that too. Andy Presby can do that too. I do a little bit more of the history side of those things. Chris Carlson can certainly do that too. And so we have people on the show that can do that. And that's sort of how I approach things, because I think it's interesting to sort of get down into the what are the salient features of this environment and compare it to the salient features of that environment and see how the answer changes over time based upon the environment. You can file off the serial numbers, run it through the science fiction converter, throw in space on the end and call it good. But those instances always scream to me when they're done. And as I always say, I'm not here to spoil anybody's fun. Nobody should walk away saying, Chris told me not to like that, because I didn't tell you not to like that. But I do think it's important to understand how the world works, and even fictional worlds. And I also think that a lot of people are frustrated writers and frustrated designers. And it's useful for those folks to have an understanding of what the important pieces are, so they don't, I don't think you need to pull back on the pull back on the stick to do a space loop in your fighter. I mean, if you want to do that, that's great. But if you're doing that, you should do it as a explicit choice that you want to do it that way, as opposed to doing it that way because you don't know any better. So. There have been consistent, let's see. Oh, so eventually kind of settled on a style also, which is something that sort of works in StreamYard. It's basically sort of an annotated PowerPoint presentation with talking heads on the side, occasionally not having talking heads on the side, depending upon who's on. Like if Chris Carlson is on or Peter Gold is on, sometimes there's slides, but a lot of times there isn't. So there's been some consistent threads throughout it. I would argue that we've sort of settled on. The low production values are still there. And that in part is because I could spend a lot of time polishing the cannonball, or I could start working on the next cannonball. I don't generally have the time to increase the production values beyond what you see. I'm trying to set things up so I have a little bit more time, but I'd actually rather produce more content than to produce prettier content. I do need to sort of standardize a little bit more. We've been able to consistently maintain a weekly cadence. There's exceptions, right? If you just sort of look on when the first episode was, we should probably have 250 episodes. But, sometimes I travel, sometimes my blood thinner tries to kill me and I'm out for 6 weeks. There are other things that come away, but when there isn't something else on my plate, I'm able to maintain a weekly cadence. And so that's great. I love spending my Saturday night here. So I'm glad you guys do too. Never really done video. The one episode we did, we watched some Battlestar Galactica video. Do you remember this, Pat?
Yes, I'm still annoyed by that.
Yeah, and the reason why he's annoyed is because that episode got taken down, and so that's the one episode, I think maybe the only episode I don't have a copy of, because it became unavailable to us because it got a copyright strike.
And it was like within minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was like before it. Yeah, it was just insane. That happened to Alec one time. I remember Alec was going to do a watch party for something or another. They were going to watch like the final episode of Game of Thrones or something like that, and it got cannexed like 30 seconds into it. It just died.
Yeah,
which is just silliness, because I don't think they weren't. It's not like they were showing the episode. They were just having people's reactions to it.
Yeah.
And so it's always been live. And Starfleet Tactical, the plan is to always have that live. If I don't like record a show when I'm not there, I just don't do a show. So I do it as a live show so that people can come and put comments in, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just kind of what we eventually sort of settled on. We've talked about doing recorded episodes and never really felt the need to. So we continue to do what we're doing. And I'm certainly also not somebody who's standing at a lectern doing stuff. I'm just sort of sitting in my chair, going all over the place. Back when I still had my cat Buddy would come and be the co-host, also the third co-host. So that's just kind of the way it is. Low production values is a trademark. I also I put here weaponized laziness, and that spoke to me when I wrote it. It speaks to me perhaps a little bit less now. And what I mean by that is this would be too hard if the production values were high. This would be too hard if I was trying to do animation. This would be too hard if I was trying to do those things, and I wouldn't be able to put it together. But as it is, because of the sort of level of effort that I put into it, into making it pretty, I'm able to, force is the wrong word, because force implies I don't want to do it. It's more along the lines of motivate, right? Because it's very easy to say, like, I got a lot of stuff to do today, and it's like, no, but the show comes first. I'll do that other stuff tomorrow, right? I'll do laundry tomorrow. I'll do the other stuff tomorrow. And so I'm able to use the sort of the level of effort that I'm willing to do as the crowbar to pry some motivation out of me. Pat, any thoughts on the present?
No, not really. I mean, I honestly haven't been around too often, so.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's my show. On the other hand, it's our show.
Well, yeah, the first half.
I mean, I keep both of those thoughts in my head. So, maybe I'll get lucky and Pat will get fired.
I'll be busier then.
That's probably true. That's probably true. But I still sort of view this as this was I didn't do all this by myself, and Lissa's always been behind the scenes, making it all work, and Alec has been supportive of the whole thing too. So it's been sort of a community effort. And on the one hand, any given episode, I'm clearly not I'm not breaking the bank commissioning artwork for it. But on the other hand, 200 episodes. A lot of COVID projects are long dead by now. So I'm actually really, really, really proud of the fact that I'm doing the 200th episode of this, and I have no plans to stop anytime soon. So, but what does the future look like? So in general, I think the right place to start is that I've kind of blatantly stolen and modified the Templin Institute's 2026 Three Commandments. This was from the Templin Institute State of the Institute message for 2026, where the proprietor, Mark, whose last name I can never remember, put up on the screen the following: Thou shalt not chase empty spectacle, nor bend thy craft to the algorithms of vanity, which he translates as no YouTube bullshit. And so I have not done any of the things that a YouTube person, somebody who is trying to play the algorithm would tell you need to do to play the algorithm. Right. Haven't done any of those things. Haven't specifically said I'm going to do the opposite. I just do what I think is right for the channel. And if it played in with the algorithm, I mean, it's not monetized. I don't make a cent off of this. Just to be clear, not monetized at all. But we kind of made a decision early on not to chase the algorithm, in part because I don't trust the algorithm. I know plenty of YouTubers who, built a small YouTube empire, and next thing you know, that's like, yeah, nothing's working and my income dropped to zero. So I just simply don't trust YouTube. YouTube for me is a medium. It's not the end all, right? I don't describe myself as a YouTuber. I'm a naval analyst and science fiction fan who has a show on YouTube. The second commandment was, thou shalt build thy enterprise with care and not trade thy soul for its profit. So build a business, but don't sell out. He specifically talked about how there was when he had a bunch of consultants try to sell him on various things, and he wasn't really interested in it. And combined with the last one, thou shalt accept bread for thy labor, but never exchange fellowship for silver. That was basically monetize the content, but not the relationship. And so I see the potential possibility. Right now, the regular viewership is pretty low. If we were getting more views, I could see that there would be a demand signal for things like a Discord server and stuff like that. I don't think we're there yet. And I have absolutely no problem with doing that. But my goal is not to set up a monetized Discord server. My goal is not to set up, monetize this or monetize that. If we get to the point where it's viable and I can flip a switch and keep on doing what I'm doing and support underwrite the $850 StreamYard bill I have, I would be happy if I could, if I would be happy if this particular hobby didn't lose money. But I'm also very aware, as a professional wargame designer in my day job, in addition to being a naval analyst, I'm very aware of the fact that the easiest way to destroy your hobby is to turn it into your job. Because when you have to do it because that's how you make your money, it's not nearly as much fun as if, you can just sort of say, I don't want to do that, right? So there's a lot of things I want to do for fun. I don't want to have to do it. I've been very much focused on the content and not all the YouTube algorithm stuff and the marketing and all the rest of it. I need to be a little bit more focused on that because a lot of that is just like spreading the viewership. And if I want to, get up on the, do the Sermon on the Mount about how naval history and naval science fiction all sort of fit together, right? If I'm just yelling into the wind and nobody hears me, then I'm not doing any good. So I want to do good. I do literally have as one of my annual goals, the idea of speak and read about my ideas. I lifted that actually because it was perfectly phrased by Peter Bregman's 18 Minutes, which is a wonderful book. I need to reread the ABC books is what I call them. David Allen's Getting Things Done, Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and Peter Bregman's 18 Minutes, which I think sort of covered the spectrum of everything from how to think about your life and how to think about your life goals to how do you set up a filing cabinet, and everything in between. And Bregman talks about the idea of sort of like having some big picture goals, and one of his is to speak and write about his ideas. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to steal that, because that perfectly captures that. And this is actually one of the things that I have as an annual goal, is to do things like the show. YouTube is the medium to do it. It is not the job. So, okay. So here's where I want to go. Here are some ideas about where I want to go. So right now, Starfleet Tactical is on the Aries Studios channel. I should have put studios in there. I did not. I don't have any plans to change that. I do know, though, that Alec is the creator of the Aries Studios channel. He has control of the Axonar channel. I forget who's actually controlling the Aries Studio channel these days. But depending upon what ends up happening with Aries Studio and all the rest of it, who knows, the channel may go away. And so if it does, I'll continue the show someplace else. But right now, the plan is for it to continue on the Aries Studios channel, but that's not my channel. I'm just letting you know things may shift around. I do want to set up a channel, and I want to grow the viewership on the current channel and on the new channel. So my inspirations for a new channel are a combination of things. So I mentioned previously the Templin Institute. They're way more produced than I want to be, but I like the fact that they have certain categories of things that they do, and they try to rotate through those categories, and they try to have sequences, and they plan things out, and they try to make that stuff work. I like that idea. I like Perun's site. Perun is a defense economist who does defense analysis. And he does his things as annotated PowerPoint briefs. So you don't even have the talking head. We don't know what his real name is. He said that he works as a consultant. He says his consultant, the people he consults for, know that he has the channel, but he does not use his real name, and he does not mix his day job with his hobby. And so that's kind of the way I view it too. And so he just puts together PowerPoints, and he's pretty unapologetic about it. He said, look, if you want me to do video, it will take 5 times as long to put together a video, which means I do 1/5 as many videos. That's kind of the attitude I have about it.
Energy allocation,
time allocation.
Same
there's
thing.
Just only so much I can do. Space Stock is, I sort of like their sequences. I like their the topics that they pick. I think they do a lot of good stuff. Hujiwana, I think, does some fantastic stuff over there. I don't always agree with him. In fact, I want to do some replies to some of that stuff, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I think it's pretty good in that regard. I like the Y files. Now, if you know about the Y files, you might go, that's an odd one to have on this list, because it's not quite conspiracy theory stuff, but AJ Gentile does claim to believe that the moon is hollow. And he's skeptical about some stuff, but not everything. But I like what they've sort of done in terms of building the community. I like his attitude about that stuff. They do everything as a podcast, or they have a podcast thing that they do. They try to put the video stuff up as the audio as a podcast. And I think that maybe I should do stuff like that. They've got a Discord server where people get together on. And he's really sort of trying to build a community there. And that's kind of, if I wanted to get big enough that I can sort of build a community, that I think that would be a good thing to do. I think we got the makings of one, but we don't have the full thing yet. And I also like, he sells merch. I don't have any desire to sell merch in the near term, but hey, if it happened, it happened. But I like his attitude about it. He says, look, if you join the channel in YouTube, you'll get a discount on the merch. So join the channel, get your discount, buy your merch, and then unjoin. And you pay for a month, and you'll save a bunch of money, and it'll be a deal. And he said, I don't care if you do that. Please do that. I just do that so that you can get a discount. And he knows that if he gives people a discount, I mean, it's the same reason why anybody does a sale, right? And I'm sure it makes it easier for him to sort of track a few things here and there because YouTube has some stats. So I can understand why it's a good move on his part, but I like the fact that he very specifically says, "Hey, you know that little trick that you've got in mind anyway? Go ahead and do it. Well, that's great. I think that's fantastic. I
Both know you're going to do it, so just do it.
Yeah, just do it. In fact, he comes out and says, I set it up so that you can do it. That is the purpose of this, is so that you can do it. I don't think it's ever going to be like a slick channel with lots of video. And, the thing about the Template Institute is they've got this sequence that they run at the beginning and they do X, Y, Z, et cetera, et cetera. That's not really where I'm going. In terms of the production values, I think Perun is really the high end of what I'm talking about here, not the low end. Not the Template Institute is the high end. Perun's really the high end there. But that's kind of where I think it would be. The last thing is I just need to be better organized to make all this stuff happen. We have a spreadsheet of all the different episodes where I record what date it was broadcast and what the topic was and whether there were any guests, etc. And I think it's 20 episodes out of date. I haven't put in the last 20 or so. That's a long time. It's way out of date. So I just need to be better organized about all that stuff. And there's the possibility of there's a possibility I may be able to set things up so that I can be better organized. That would make it easier to be better organized. More on that later if it happens. So the new channel would be supplementing the work on the Aries Studios channel. My conceptualization for it, this is just sort of me spitballing, is that every week there would be 3 posts. One would be an encore episode of Starfleet Tactical, maybe minimally edited a little bit. There's generally the "Hey, how you doing" part. Probably would take that out, at least to some degree. And put one of those up. Do a 1 or 2 short 5-minute things on a given topic. I haven't really done shorts, but it would be like a little scripted thing. There's all built-in AI thing that will do stuff out of stuff. So maybe I need to start going through episodes of Starfleet Tactical and doing little AI clips out of them. And then there would be a longer episode that would be something that would be like a Perun thing. It would be kind of scripted. It would be a synthesis of stuff that previously had come out. So you can sort of think of the Starfleet Tactical episodes as being the beta version of it. It would be a synthesis of stuff, and it would be probably organized more in terms of like a campaign of topics, right? So I'm going to cover all the things about X. They're all going to be a fixed length. It wouldn't be one of these things where, this week's episode just ended up being an hour and 45 minutes. I'm not going to do that. There would be, there might very well be written versions of the longer episodes because I can download the transcript and then turn that into something that looks like an essay. There'd be more structure. So like borrowing from the Template Institute, define types of episodes and with playlists to go along with it, and probably more of a schedule. I try to do that sort of stuff on a schedule, which since I've got the baseline material from previous episodes, that should work. And then I'd probably put in some supporting efforts like podcasts and Discord and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about for the future. So I said in the intro or in the description that I talk about topics I've got in the queue for Starfleet Tactical. I was going to give you the summary of the list of topics. The problem is there's a lot of topics I have written down. A lot of them are not electronically stored and they're not organized, but they're in a bunch of different places. I've got some in a notebook, some on loose pieces of paper. There's a little box that has a bunch of them in it. They're all over the place. There was more than I thought when I went and tried to do that earlier today, tried to organize them. I didn't even really have a list of categories. I've kind of put together a notional list. But this turned into one of those things where I really kind of wish I had a library science degree so I had a better idea about how to think about organizing all this data. And so I'm in the process of rethinking about how I want to do that. But I'm going to give you some big picture topic categories. These are the sorts of things that I intend to talk about. And it's just a draft list. And, you know, these can apply to the real world or science fiction. Usually there's some of both, but I mean, I can easily do it from both sides. So it's possible that for a lot of these things, it's really talking about 2 episodes. One starting over here and sort of, you know, starting with the naval side and looking a little bit at the science fiction. The other one focused on the science fiction, focusing a little bit on the naval side. There's lots of specific series, works, other, you know, books, etc. Star Trek, Babylon 5, Exordium, Traveler, The Orville, Space 1999, the Orion's Arm Universe Project, which I really haven't talked about in this show, which has a huge amount of stuff associated with it that's really cool. There's overviews on what it is. There's watch along or read alongs. There's deep dives of individual pieces of it. There's a lot of naval concepts. Like I haven't done a show on space piracy. I think I've mentioned it a few times, but haven't really done a show on it. Probably need to. Talked a bit about the utility of speed in naval combat. I don't think I've done an actual show on that. It comes up consistently because it's something that fits in the ship design, but I don't think I've specifically focused on just that. There's all sorts of things that one could call naval composition, you know, different ship types, history of different ship types, fleet design, infrastructure, shipyards, you know, how do you build a starship? What's the right way to build a starship? Probably not in a field in Iowa. Probably not in a field in Iowa. But you know, Tom Pope and I were talking about how does this work in the Honor Harrington universe? And there's a couple of ways you could think about doing it, because in the Honor Harrington shipyards, a lot of David describes the ships as being grown, at least in terms of the armor, as much as they are built, because it's sort of molecular assembly using tractor beams to move atoms around. And so there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can sort of have the big space and your 3D printer, your giant tractor beam based 3D printer moves down the space, or the 3D printer tractor beam thing stays still and the ship sort of grows out of it, right? Either one of those works, right? If you're a 3D printer guy, does the print head move in 3 dimensions or in 2 dimensions, or does it just move back and forth and the belt moves underneath it? You could do it either way, right? So I want to talk about shipyards at some point. I've got lots of plans. I want to do an entire series on different types of ships. Like, what is a frigate? What is a destroyer? What is a battleship versus a dreadnought? Cruisers is probably going to be 5 episodes. In fact, I say down in the corner there, warship types is probably 8 episodes. It's probably more like 10. Because between protected cruisers, armored cruisers, battle cruisers, heavy cruisers, and 2 different flavors of light cruisers, and unprotected cruisers, between when you add all that stuff up, that right there is probably 5 episodes, at least 4, to really get into the nitty-gritty details of that. There's lots of things on processes and doctrine that I could talk about, like the requirements and acquisitions process. How does Starfleet decide what it needs? I used to be part of the requirements and acquisition process for DoD, specifically on the Navy side of things. So I've got some idea about how to do requirements. How does Starfleet decide what it needs? Who makes that determination? How do they know that they got it right? It might be worthwhile shining a spotlight on that sort of piece. It's worth looking at how navies fight. In fact, Frank Uhlig, the former editor of the Naval War College Review, who was just a darling guy. He was long retired by the time I got to Newport. But I used to run into him at events because he still went to lectures and the like. Frank wrote a book called How Navies Fight, and it talked about how different allied navies conducted combat operations and what missions they were focused on. And so there was a bit about how, sea control versus sea denial, amphibious warfare, how it works, and who was specialized in what. And so I think, wouldn't it be interesting to sort of think about what does the Klingon versus Romulan versus Federation mission statements look like? And do the Andorians do their own thing? We have reason to believe, I think, that while Earth doesn't maintain its own navy, that the Andorians probably do, and the Tellarites probably do, and the Vulcans probably do. They have their own fleets within the Federation structure. So how do they, what do they do that is different from what the Federation does, from what Starfleet does? So lots of things about how things work, in general, things like the Federation economy versus specific topics like transporters. There's a lot of videos out on YouTube that I'd like to do responses to. In most cases, sort of like, hey, you forgot this, they forgot that. Like Hujiwana stuff from Space Dock is really pretty good, but I'd like to sort of add some context to some of this stuff. Other stuff is less good. Some of the stuff is very good, but I think perhaps wrong. Like Steve Shives has done some wonderful stuff, and he's done one recently on Is Starfleet the Military? I put Is Star Trek the Military? I meant to say Is Starfleet the Military? I think he's wrong in his conclusions because I think he's got a too narrow view of that. But everything he said is thought provoking, and I'd like to be thought provoking.
Yeah, he has some fun videos. So
yeah, he does good work. He does good work.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's other people who do less good work. There's some people that are sort of on the cusp, but like there's a few people, and I'm not going to name names, but there's a few people who I'm not going to do responses to them because I don't pay anybody I do something that looks like a response to, and I probably won't call out people by name when I do it unless I want to say nothing but good things. Anybody I do a response to is good enough that I bothered to listen to it to the end. There's a few that I just don't even hit play on anymore because I just know that it's like, yeah, it's going to be garbage. It's from that guy. It's going to be garbage. So I want to do author interviews. I've done a few, but nowhere near as many as I've intended to. But like I was talking with Walter Hunt about it today. He said, like, am I ever going to be on the show? And I said, yeah, I want you on the show, but I got to reread your books first. I got to reread all 4 books in the series that I want to have him come on and talk about. His response is,
why do you have to reread all of his books? I mean, you have him. You can ask some questions and let him talk about his books. He wrote them. Because I would argue you're setting the bar so high that it'll be difficult to get there.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right.
Because basically I don't want it to be like hey, Walter, tell me about your books. I wanted it to be a discussion about the details. I want it to be at the level of
but you're capable of having the discussion still. You are well versed in much of this stuff.
No. In the case of Walter's stuff in particular, I made the comment, I need to reread your books, and he said, yeah, I need to reread them too.
Yeah,
because he hasn't worked in that series in a while. He's got a prequel that I've read the first 2/3 of and have made some suggestions on it, but he hasn't finished that. And so there's a bunch of people are talking about various shows. Like Wright points out that Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles is a great channel. It is. He's fantastic. He's dealing with the real world, and he can do it in a lot more detail than than we can. But I mean, he will talk about how, why did the P-39 Air Cobra work well for the Russians and not work well for us? And the answer, a big chunk of the answer, has to do with high altitude versus low altitude engine performance, and the fact that the Russians did everything at low altitude. And so they never paid the penalty of trying to use that airplane at high altitude, whereas the US Army Air Corps put a lot of emphasis on high altitude performance, because we did a bunch of stuff at high altitude, like, for instance, escorting bombers. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. It's a great, so I want to have Thomas Mays on. I know that he's got a sequel to his book, A Sword into Darkness. He said he told me he was going to rewrite it because it's got too many viewpoint characters and it's too hard to follow. He is just about to retire from the Navy. And so I'm hoping that means he's going to have more time to write books. I want to just do a deep dive on Winchell Chung's atomic rockets. I mean, I could do an infinite number of episodes on Winch's atomic rockets webpage. I was involved in a bunch of those. If you look at it, you'll see I'm quoted all over them. A lot of them came out of discussions on the SF Consummel mailing list, which I founded back in the 90s. And but I think Winch has done a great job of pulling it all together. I don't always agree with what Winch has done there. I think I can add some nuance to it, and so I'd like to have some long discussions about various pages on his website.
But that's the fun part. People come at it from different ideas, different areas.
Yeah. And Winch will be the first person, whenever anybody says, he's an expert in space combat, he says, "Whoa, I just wrote a really good term paper." That's how he phrases it. I wrote a really good term paper. The last thing on the list here is my creative endeavors, and that's basically the placeholder for, at one point I asked everybody, I asked you a couple of times, you all said you wanted to hear it, of like, if I were going to sort of rewrite the technology behind Star Trek, what would my version of Starfleet look like? What would my version of Starfleet look like? And so I still haven't put that together. I do have a page of notes on how I would do it, and some of them fits in the category that it's entirely consistent with what we see on screen. Like, for instance, I think in the original series, I think that big navigational deflector is also being used as a communication dish. It wouldn't surprise me if you're way out beyond where all the beacons are and all the repeaters to the subspace network, and you want to phone home, you might very well have to point your dish back at where you think the nearest starbase is, in order to be able to punch a signal that distance in subspace radio at faster than light speeds. Is there anything in any of the tech manuals that indicate that that's true? Closest we get is some hints that that's how things work with sensors. That's how the faster than light sensors might work. But there's nothing specific that says that. But I want to go into a bunch of issues like that.
Yeah.
So in my headcanon, that's how that works. Okay, so here's some questions for you all to think about, and then I'll start asking Pat, and I can start answering questions that we see here. These are things to think about for now. At some point, I want to do a survey of some sort to get feedback on this, but I thought about this part relatively late and decided I wanted to play around with the survey. I didn't want to just throw something up. So any topics you would like to see? Any ideas you would like me to add to the list from what I've said? Any ideas on ways that just, like places I should, for lack of a better term, advertise or market to? And if I were to do something like Discord, would that be of value to you? What supporting efforts would people find a value and participate in? So I'm interested in those sorts of topics. And at some point in the next couple of episodes, I'll put together a survey and I'll ask you folks that. I should probably also create a Starfleet Tactical Facebook page as sort of as a landing spot for everybody to go to. I haven't done that yet either. There's a lot of things that I've had on the list of things to do, but I didn't want to do them until I thought I was going to be able to consistently participate in them. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was just sort of create a Facebook page and then never go to it and never participate in it, et cetera, and just have it end up being this dead Facebook page. So I'm trying to set things up in such a way that I can commit to being a little bit more of a participant on stuff like that. And the 200th episode seemed to be a good time to bring this up. So now let's go through questions. Pat, first of all, any thoughts from you?
On future topics?
On any of this?
Oh, on any of it. So you were I was trying to, back when you were talking about doing comment videos and stuff like that. Like, for instance, the topic of replicators. There's some people who talk about
replicators.
What?
I got to get back to replicators.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. There's suddenly a delay here. But my point simply is, and that's just one example. Some of them talk about it and they just assume, a replicator generates anything you want, something from nothing, and then they launch into all the problems. Well, like you just make an atomic bomb or something like that, right? So, like some of these people are people who clearly haven't really thought about it too much, or they assume that there's no limitations to the technology, either legal, technical, or just the physics of however that works and stuff. So, but
I want to do replicators again. Andy and I did a replicator episode that was intended to be part 1 of 2. And as it ended up, we ended up spending as much time talking about the part 2 stuff as we did the part 1 stuff. And it didn't break down the way that I thought it was going to. I thought the right answer was to start with the big picture and then go to the small picture, and that didn't work.
Well, a lot of that discussion also was hand in hand with the economy and is Star Trek space communism and stuff like that. And I guess my very basic. What's that?
Oh, go ahead.
My very basic answer is I believe communism or socialism is where the government controls the means of production, whereas in this case, in Star Trek, each individual controls the means of at least basic necessity production. So I assume that's got to fundamentally change things in ways that I couldn't even begin to speculate on. So since I spent most of my adult life practicing not hitting the planet, so as opposed to studying economics deeply.
The first episode was intended to be sort of like the economy doesn't work the way that you think it does, or like even if replicators work the way you think they do, it doesn't lead to the results that you think it leads to. And then the second episode was going to be, and it doesn't work the way that you think it does.
Right.
That got all sort of mashed together. Because there was one person in particular, probably he did a 4-part series. I'm probably going to do a response to it. One person in particular was basically saying like, well, you can make fusion fuel. So it's basically he said it's a perpetual motion machine. And it's like,
right. It isn't.
You're assuming that you're assuming that anything that you make has zero cost.
Yeah. Everything has a cost. Somewhere along the way, Starfleet can only create so many warp cores and photon torpedo launchers and shield generators, and they all get allocated to different ships. So, whether you want to measure it in dollars or whatever, but it costs them something in resources, time, manpower, energy, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if you boil a cubic mile of seawater, you can get a gram of gold out of it. And seawater's free, so therefore gold is free, right?
Piece of cake, right?
Yeah. Besides the fact that, people say that you can make anything. Okay, make me Central Park West.
Well, right. Well, and then land ownership is a whole different thing, right? So
yeah. So
we don't really know how that works. How does somebody get the the finest property if everything's free. So,
yeah, and I'll point out the thing that I always point out within Star Trek discussions. The statements that everybody points to almost all come from a single source. And that source is Jean-Luc Picard.
Right. Yeah.
And that source is Jean-Luc Picard talking to somebody from the 20th or 21st century, trying to sell them on the idea of the Federation, giving them the fourth grade economics explanation.
Right. So, yeah. It's definitely, it's different, but again, Star Trek isn't about answering the question of how they got there. It's about the people who happen to be there in that future, right? We can all have our, things, and probably there's a really good chance you can't get there from here based on what we know and what we think we know and what we can speculate on. So it's just a what if. Ultimately, it's a what if story. That's an unsatisfying answer, I know, but coming up with theories on how it works or how they got there is still fun and interesting. So, and I think worth doing because fun and interesting.
Yeah, it's just like with Starship Troopers, people say, well, it's unrealistic, you couldn't get there. And it's like, it's a what if story. In the same, Jonathan Swift didn't really think that there was an island with giant people and another island with tiny people. Right? That's not what that was about.
Right. Yeah.
We had a conversation at dinner tonight with my friend Sean Barnett and Mike Markowitz, who Pat's actually met them because Pat's an airline pilot and he flies all over the place. And when he flies to where I'm at, I introduce him to the locals. And we were talking about favorite episodes, and one of them, we all agree that Darmok is one of our favorite episodes. Now, I think Darmok, when it first came out, I thought fantastic episode, but it doesn't make sense. I've now come to the conclusion that I think it makes more sense than I thought previously, right? Because there's a difference between language and communication. And
I think that was I think they mentioned that in that episode.
They might.
Yeah,
I mean, my take was, how could you ever get to this situation where people could only talk that way? And then the internet came along, and I realized I once had a conversation. I've had conversations online that consisted of nothing but passing memes back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Darmok and his people talk in memes.
Yeah.
And so I realized that it made more sense than I first thought, because it wasn't about language, it was about communication.
Maybe at least following the principle, though I know they use words. A picture's worth 1,000 words. You can communicate something a whole bunch with a picture, perhaps, without having all the words. And that's what those little statements are, is that little encompassed in that statement is this whole story. So
now
there's probably context and tone in their speaking if you've got to do it, because they in the next gen, when they were discussing it, they're like, they can understand the individual words, they just don't know what it means when you put it all together, and that was the crux of the problem.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. Try saying that with a picture.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, going back up to the top to look at questions. So if you got any questions, now's the time.
There's one. Oh, he said video idea. Perhaps a video on life in escape pods in different sci-fi universes.
Oh yeah, I like that. Pen, paper. Especially since on an episode we did lifeboats, because Peter Gold showed me a lifeboat. I got to go inside.
Well, just one notion comes into mind right now. In Star Trek, a starship traveling at warp that is suffering some catastrophe where they don't get to just go down to impulse in time. Can you get to the life pods, and can the life pod survive the transition between warp speed and sublight? Probably doesn't have it. I mean, certainly wouldn't have a navigational deflector. Do you carry momentum? Actually, I don't even know the answer to this. Do you carry momentum from warp into sublight, or do you have to start accelerating from zero?
I think that they probably say, like, if you're at warp and you have something like that, you don't go to the life pods. You only do the life pods when there's a place, when you're at sublight in a place where you're not going to be scattered all over hell. Just like, I mean, like on the Gemini flights, they had ejection seats, but there were parts of that regime where they just couldn't.
Well, you're going to die.
Yeah, you're just going to die.
Well, I mean, even in a modern jet fighter, I believe, and I don't know what the speed is or where the line is, but above some certain speed, you're just a little pink cloud after after you separate from the aircraft. So,
yeah, I mean, and you know, ejecting is not fun.
No, I have never heard it described as that. I did know a guy a long time ago whose call sign was Skip. Because his plane ejected, he ejected from his plane sideways and bounced along the water. Survived, but that was his call sign after that.
Did he fly again?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, he was an instructor.
There's a lot of people who never fly again after they eject.
Sure.
Because it fucks up their back so bad.
Yeah. Yep. Newer ejection seats accelerate a little more slowly. The older ones are basically, you're just sitting on a bomb that shoots you instantaneously up.
Yeah, the initial design used an artillery shell, and then they went, yeah, that's a problem. And so now they actually they try to accelerate you as slowly as they can. Now they don't have very many options for doing it that slowly, though, because they have to get you out, and generally
you have to you still have to evade a fireball.
Yeah. Well, you're trying to evade a fireball, and you don't have that much space to ramp up, right?
Yeah.
You want your thrust to occur while you're on the rail, so it's pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Once you're out of the airplane, you don't want that rocket firing anymore, because it could push you right into the airplane.
Sure. So back to the
that far.
Back to the Starfleet ejection or life pod thing. I mean, you know, photon torpedoes have warp sustainer engines. Is it possible that a life pod could have a warp sustainer engine to help it ramp down slowly or something like that? It seems like it would be more dangerous than taking the thing while you're at sublight speed. But I'm just saying, when like, hey, the choice is everybody dies or 80% survives, maybe you take the 80%. Same thing with like emergency transporters, like trying to evacuate a ship.
I suspect that doctrine says that if you're at warp, you separate the saucer.
No, I'm talking about the ship is for whatever reason, the ship is suffering a catastrophe. It's going to die. And we've had plenty of episodes where they can't drop to sublight speeds for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think they just die.
No,
Sorry, guys.
I don't think they give up that easily. But and again, we already know with photon torpedoes, they've got the technology to sustain a small vehicle at warp speed for a period of time.
Yeah, but the period of time is measured in like 10 seconds.
Sure, and maybe that's enough. I mean, I don't know. We're spitballing here.
Could be.
So, but the other one would be using your transporters to evacuate. The Federation burn.
So I think he's talking about Discovery.
Yeah.
I don't do disco. Sorry, I'm not going to comment on it, Dustin, because I just don't. I stopped watching disco, and I don't know how the burn was supposed to have occurred, and I just don't do disco. People like disco. Hey, that's great. be my guest. Go watch it. If you like J.J. Abrams Star Trek, be my guest. Go watch it.
I only saw that episode. I only saw that episode once, so haven't done the deep dive. Thinking Babylon 5 Omega class had life pods, but no one seems to be able to use them when needed.
Yeah, let's see. So Wright says he likes the naval history architecture. So thank you very much. I like doing the overlap with the Star. Let me just put it up. Favorite episodes are the naval history architecture overlap with starship designs. I really like doing those two. Let's see. Randall Wong points out the cost of the Paramount sets dwarf the cost of earlier episodes. Could be. I mean, sets are always sort of a capital expenditure. I remember Roddenberry said that they specifically wrote a scene in the pilot in the engine room because he knew if they didn't build it for the pilot, it'd never get built. Let's see.
Oh, a discussion of the effects of FTL travel on battlefield intel might be interesting.
So I'm going to get to some of that. Because one of the things I want to do on the show is I've talked about the Exordium series and doing a read along with the new edition. The Exordium in Exordium, what you have is a situation where they have tactically useful FTL drive with speed of light sensors, so they can move to places and be effectively invisible because the light hasn't gotten to the target yet. So it's highly predictive, right? They're seeing stuff out of order. If I pop into something and I'm 10 light seconds away, it's 10 seconds before the target sees me. But if the target has been there for more than 10 seconds, I at least know the target's there. And there are other books that have things like that. Like the same thing is in Robert Chase's The Game of Fox and Lion and Kevin O'Donnell's Fire on the Border. I want to talk about both of those books too. So part of that Exordium series is probably going to be one episode on just the concept of speed of light sensors with a tactically useful FTL drive. Like I remember in Fire on the Border, they're getting reports and it's like, okay, we see this ship and we see this other ship, and the computer assesses with an 87% probability that they're the same ship. Just time late. And then the one ship goes away and the computer's doing the math and goes, yep, it's the same ship. So you can do things like time on target attacks because you fire and then you jump to another location and that's closer and you fire and you jump to another location that's closer and you fire again, and now you've got shots coming in from 3 different directions that were all fired by the same ship. So there's all sorts of interesting things about combat in that universe, and that kind of gets to the part of that is the ISR piece of it. Like how do I put together a sensor picture in that regard? Arias Kaufman and I designed a game to do that, actually. Maybe I should talk about that too.
An explanation of how that worked would be fun.
Yeah, I cheated. I went the total design for effect route where everything shows up on the map. You just can't do anything with the information you have. Okay. So basically, until you build the sensor picture, you start off with a negative to hit modifier, such that you have to roll like an 18 on a D12 with no modifiers. Mm-hmm. And so you have to build your sensor picture, which gives you modifiers that make it within the realm of the possible to hit.
Okay.
But it works pretty good. I like playing it. There's some very interesting discussions about bulldogs and cockatiels that took place. The fat electrician is hysterical. Yeah, I like the fat electrician. I haven't watched a whole bunch of his stuff, but I like the fat electrician. He does some very interesting. He's not doing electrician stuff. He's doing like naval history and stuff like that. I don't know exactly what Wright was talking about, but he said that sounds like the British reclaiming the tea from Boston Harbor. I like the imagery. I'll just point out, Wright, that that in the book, Dizzy was a guy, and since the book is the only form of Starship Troopers that's ever been done, I actually have to rewatch all the movies because I haven't watched some of them, and I need to update my Starship Troopers.
All the movie? Oh, that's right. They came out with some, what, 3 or 4 more after the first one?
So there's the first 3 are live action. The second one was basically an aliens type story. They're trapped on some planet. It had like you could just cross off Starship Troopers and you wouldn't notice it. It was a generic, the bugs are eating us sort of thing. The third one was another mobile infantry movie. And then I think they've done 2 or 3 animated movies since then.
Yeah, Roughnecks, according to Thomas the Cat.
Roughnecks was a series.
Yeah, he said it was a cartoon. Really good.
Right, but in addition to that, they did some animated movies.
Okay. Drakenfell. Does Star Trek fleet assessments?
Yeah. He did some with another person. Yeah.
Oh, Venom Geek Media with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm familiar.
Yeah, who I generally don't do Venom Geek Media. I find myself very frustrated to the point where I'm throwing stuff across the room. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about a fellow YouTuber, but somebody else brought him up. I wasn't gonna bring him up. Drakenfell does some fantastic stuff. Alex Clark does some fantastic stuff. Clark is somebody that I want to do some stuff to like companion pieces to. Because on the one hand, he does some fantastic stuff, but one of the things that I think a lot of the more naval oriented people are, and Clark especially, will say things like, well, that's not a frigate because that's not the mission of a frigate. Well, okay, but frigates had multiple missions. And those missions change over time. And when push comes to shove, the mission of a frigate is what the commanding officer or the fleet commander says the mission of the frigate is.
Yeah. You have the ship you have, and
with the exception of mine layers and minesweepers and things like mine layers and minesweepers and oilers and stuff like that, no ship in World War II had as its primary mission the thing that it was built to do.
Right. Yeah. That sounds about right.
Defended carriers and conducted shore bombardment. Did they shoot other battleships? Yeah, occasionally. But they were built to fight other battleships, and that was like down on their list of things to do. Aircraft carriers were originally built for scouting. Did they do that? Well, yeah, when they weren't busy bombing the shit out of stuff.
Well, they scouted for things to bomb the shit out of.
Yeah.
Depends on American or Japanese doctrine as far as how much they allocated to that. But
and speaking of scouting was the traditional role of a cruiser.
Yeah.
Did we use cruisers for scouting?
No.
No. We used
Well,
airplanes.
the Japanese used like the tone or tone with its little, they seem to use their little scout planes on their cruisers to go do the scouting so that they didn't use up their bombing planes to go do that stuff.
Yes, but like
it cost them the Battle of Midway.
The World War I conceptualization of a cruiser was you send cruisers out to find the enemy fleet.
Yeah.
In the World War II conceptualization was you sent airplanes out to find the enemy.
Yes, exactly.
You built ships to find the enemy fleet, and then you used airplanes to do it instead.
Yeah. All I'm saying is many of those surface ships also carried one or two little airplanes in some cases.
Yeah, but they didn't have to be on a cruiser.
Right. Well, I don't know that destroyers. I don't know that destroyers carried aircraft.
You could have just had another carrier.
Sure, I'm just saying they supplemented, like little destroyers did not carry aircraft, like heavy cruisers generally did.
You didn't build a cruiser to carry airplanes. No, you built a cruiser and then you put airplanes on it because you could.
It was a capability that some had.
Yeah. And so, when people say like, oh, it can't be X. Steve Shive says this in his talk on Is Starfleet a Military? And he's got a very sort of 20th, 21st century view of what a military is. You go back far enough in time and you end up with militaries look a lot different than that. Like if you go back to like the Anglo-Dutch wars, a warship was just whatever ship you happened to decide to put cannons on.
Right.
The trading fleet and the war fleet were pretty much the same fleet. And so you end up with things like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, within our current conceptualization, but when push comes to shove, I've never gotten hung up on things like that because I know about all the variability there is there. Like the famous example that I use from the Honorverse is destroyers. Havenite destroyers are based on tonnage. Manticoran destroyers are based on missions. And so you end up with Manticoran destroyers that the Havenites would have classed as cruisers because they were so big. And within their own given classification scheme, both answers are correct.
Right. In the end, you have hulls with some amount of weaponry that get used in whatever way they need to, despite what some pie in the sky theorist had when they built the thing. So
and for a while there, starting in about 1975 and going to the Arleigh Burke class, a cruiser was an air defense ship and a destroyer was an ASW ship.
Yeah, right.
And there wasn't that much difference in size. There was a little bit, not that much.
It almost seems like they almost seem fairly meaningless these days. You just
There's a minor size difference, and then you have the land attack destroyer that is bigger than any cruiser that we've had for 20 years. More than that. Whenever Long Beach decommissioned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A Zumwalt is bigger than any ships, any surface vessel we've had since any surface warship we've had since Long Beach decommissioned.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like 12,000 tons, something like that.
Yeah. Are they refitting the Zumwalts as opposed to experimental hulls, or are they still just doing experimental stuff, or are they actually deploying?
I think the plan is to deploy them with some like conventional prompt strike missile on them or something like that. They were going to put some missile on it. The thing is, it's really limited in terms of its radar. In that it doesn't really have a good one. I mean, it's not something that you can just sort of say like, oh, if I put air defense missiles on it, I now have an anti-air platform, because it doesn't have the right radar for that. And it does have the composite deck house. And as Chris Carlson points out, everybody thinks that composite is light, and it is, unless you use enough of it to equal the performance of steel, at which point it's no longer light.
Okay.
It may not reflect radar like steel does. And so you might still want to do it, but it's not light. Just like the LPD-17 class, the San Antonio class, moved away from the composite mast because the mast was so heavy. And the steel I can just weld, right? But composite stuff requires herbs and sacrifices to dark gods and stuff like that to repair. Not the sort of stuff that you do at sea.
So I will say, I just happened to look up the Drakenifel, and he has a 2-hour interview with John Parshall based on his new book, 1942.
It's in the queue. I'll probably listen to it tomorrow.
Okay.
While I'm assembling my powerlift recliner chair and deploying my new television because I'm getting ready for the surgery recovery.
Okay. Yep. I've just been listening to the book. It's great. I recommend it highly. John Parshall, 1942. So.
I put it on one of the like tables I had in the other room, and then which collapsed from the weight, and then I had to.
Did it go down through the floor?
Oh yeah. Like it ended up in my downstairs neighbor's living room.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I mean, it
sounds about right.
Yeah, the book is huge.
Yeah. It's a formidable book. You could use it for armor plating. You could use it. You could put legs on it, have it be a table.
Somebody put a picture of it on Facebook, and John saw it and said something like, "You should move it over so that it's directly over the leg for added support. Don't have it in the middle of the table. Move it directly over the leg for added support." But John worked on that book for 17 years.
Yeah, and it shows. It's an interesting read. It's covers 1942 month by month, and it it gets into a whole lot of detail that you probably didn't know anything about. So, but it's basically talking about the transition from us losing the war to, by the end of it, or at some point in there starts to be hope. So, and how that happened. Yes, the audiobook is 60 hours long, as Thomas the Cat pointed out. Yes, It is. I've got it. I think I've got 40 hours to go still. And I feel like I've been listening to it a lot. So, but his writing is good. He's humorous and stuff. So yes, I'd highly recommend.
And I want to reread. I don't think I think I've read all of his Midway book, but I haven't read it by starting on page 1 and finishing on page whatever.
Oh, I've read it twice and loved it both times.
Yeah.
So.
And John's such a nice guy.
Yes.
And he's one of the people I want on the show. And he said that he's willing to do it. It's just, I'm not going to have him on until I've read the stuff, right? Because I want to have a more in-depth I don't want to just say, "So tell us about your book, John."
Well, I think you could come up with more insightful questions than just that. You're eminently qualified to do so. I just let him tell the story. So,
yes, yeah. I mean, he is somebody that I really could say, "John, tell us about your book. Be specific, give details, and then say, well, it's been an hour and a half, time to wrap up." And John, I would.
And you should consider that as a viable course of action.
I should. That might actually work out well, because John and John's a great guy in that.
Yeah. So, because, that's a lot of hours.
Okay, so Delon says Earth has developed a moneyless economic system. Well, is it moneyless? I mean, people for a moneyless economic system, they spend an awful lot of time talking about credits. How would humans expand into the universe where money is still in play? We kind of see that with the Ferengi and Gold Press Latinum and all the rest of it. We see a little bit in Deep Space Nine with Zog talking to Jake.
Nog.
Why'd I say Zog? Nog talking.
It was a combination of General Zod and Nog.
Yeah. Nog talking to Jake, but the problem is, in some ways, it's two high school students having a conversation about deep thoughts.
Well, actually, the one that gets quoted a lot of times is Jake wants a little bit of latinum from Nog, and Nog's like, get your own stuff. It's like, well, we don't have money. We work to better ourselves. And Nog looks at him straight in the eye and goes, what does that mean exactly? And of course, we never get a good answer.
Yeah.
But again, it's an insightful question from said teenager.
Yes.
So actually, I believe he's a little bit older by then. He might even have been a cadet, but still teenager.
Yeah. So let's see. Patrick Gross says he was thinking of B5. Omega class had life pods, but no one seems to be able to use them when needed.
Correct.
Yeah, I think there's a lot,
Well, they did take a lot of prisoners, but yes, there were what was it? Severed Dreams, he's shouting, get to the life pods, damn it, get to the life pods, and then the ship explodes. But they did get plenty of prisoners over time. So.
Yeah, and I think in that particular instance, wasn't that an opponent ship that he was yelling at to do that?
Yes. Yeah, right. They had been firing at the attacking Omega ship, and then they were hoping. Oh, well, and then there was another one where the captain of the Churchill, her ship was in bad shape, and I think he told her to, get to the life pods, and captain says it's too late, nothing left to do now. And then I think she rammed one of the enemy ships.
Yeah,
which everybody stared in horror at the carnage.
Her crew might have been gone by that point.
Maybe, but maybe the bridge crew was there.
I'm also reminded there's a guy named Lars Solander who wrote a book called How Carriers Fought, and I need to do that book on the show. I need to be. Sometimes I look at it and I go like, okay, I can do the history part of this, but where's the science fiction hook, right? There always has to be a hook to the other piece of it. If I'm doing a history thing, if I'm doing a non-science fiction thing, there has to be a science fiction hook to it. And some of Solander's stuff is incredibly interesting, but the hook is not as obvious as it could be. He does talk, though, about how, the kamikazes were a program, was a specific mission set that the Japanese adopted later in the war. But it wasn't like it was unknown for Japanese airplanes to ram themselves into ships beforehand, right? The difference was the kamikazes actually went with the intent of doing that, but plenty of Japanese ships Japanese airplanes went down fighting. Why was that? Well, the Japanese put zero effort into search and rescue. Mm-hmm. We put a shit ton of effort into search and rescue, right? Catalina's flying through the battle zone for days afterwards looking for life rafts. The whole bit. We spent a ton of time looking for downed pilots. The Japanese did not.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those Japanese airplanes also didn't have radios, so there was no way for them to say like, hey, I'm heading in such direction and I'm going down. And so the Japanese just basically knew that, I'm dead anyway. Might as well take some more of them with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suspect there might have been a little bit of that going on in Babylon 5.
How do you mean?
Just from the standpoint, it's like my side can't pick me up, and their side is traitors. So it's not clear to me that Captain Yoshi would have gone for the life pods even if she had time.
Well, we don't know what was going on. She may have already told, like you said, she may have told her crew, I wouldn't come to the conclusion. It could have just been that there were no fires. There was no gravity. They had no chance of getting out of where they were.
I've often said that Star Trek VI should have ended. By the time Star Trek VI came around, we know that McCoy survived to Next Gen, and we know that Spock survived to Next Gen. Scotty had not yet been seen.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that Spock and McCoy survived. So I really seriously thought they should have gotten Spock and McCoy off the ship somehow, and the rest of them should have gone down in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, but then they'd have to find a way to resurrect everybody, and we'd need 3 more movies to get them back.
Yeah,
but
Paramount can go screw themselves. So I think I think they should have done it, and I think the way to do it is, I think the I can't remember what Christopher Plummer's character's name was.
General Chang.
Seems to me the easiest way to take him out would have been just to ram him.
Why? You can't ram something you can't find.
Figure out a way to find him and then ram him.
Well, they figured out a way to find him and they shot him and he died. And they didn't have to blow up in the process. It worked quite well, actually. No, and by the way, I'll point out it was Spock and McCoy that pulled that off.
My point is they should have gone out in a blaze of glory.
Not sure.
As opposed to doing the entire geriatric crew thing.
No.
Give them all a glorious death.
Well, actually, I would say the better strategic thing, and I'm a big fan of Star Trek too, like many, but you don't kill Spock, and then you don't have to waste 2 movies getting Spock back, in which case now they're old. And if Star Trek V had at least been a good movie, by the way, it was a good book. If you ever read the book, it's good because the story had some merit to it and stuff. It was just the movie was executed poorly for whatever Hollywood reasons there were at the time. But so if you had Star Trek 2 and maybe Spock survived or whatever, then you don't need to have a search for Spock. And I like Star Trek 3. I like Star Trek 4. Just, Star Trek 4 was great. I'm not being critical of those movies, but my point is the whole purpose or the whole theoretical premise of the show, right, is explorers out doing whatever it is they do on the Enterprise, searching for things. Well, Star Trek 3, we blow up the Enterprise and we steal a Klingon ship. Star Trek 4, we fly a Klingon ship. But there's no exploring strange new worlds there, really, other than going to 1980, which we already lived in at the time. And then finally, by Star Trek V, we were all set to have an adventure, and the movie was just petered out and so we have, in my mind, to some degree, that fit within the general premise of the show. We have Star Trek 1, 2, and 6. So I mean, I liked 3 and 4 also and stuff. They were good, nice little adventures. But my point is killing Spock, I think, basically wrecked the movie franchise for the original crew.
Although 4 did generate probably the single Star Trek quote that I've used the most.
Don't everybody remember where we parked?
No, I will frequently say that I did too much LDS back in the 60s.
Oh, yes. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. And what? You don't use money in the 23rd century? Actually, no, we don't. So
let's see. Going through, F-111 had an eject pod for 2. It started out with an ejection pod for 2. They eventually concluded that was a bad idea. I think the F-111, didn't they went to ejection seats.
I believe it had I thought it had a 2-person cockpit ejection capsule thing, something like that.
No, but I think they got rid of that.
Okay, that I'm not familiar with. It's been a long time since I built my EF-111 model from a long time ago, but I'm only aware of the crew that died bombing Libya.
Yeah, and I think they went to a standard ejection seats. I need to double check that. I know that the same thing, they talked about a 4-person pod in the B1 and they concluded it wasn't survivable.
Okay.
So, the reason why you would want to do that is because it allows you to do a separation theoretically at supersonic speeds, and it protects you. It doesn't put you out in a supersonic wind stream.
Yeah.
But so it means that you're much likelier to survive right up to the point where you die when you hit the ground.
Because it's going to fall.
Hit the ground, you're more likely to be alive when you hit the ground and then die, as opposed to dying up in the air.
Gotcha.
That's kind of how that worked out.
Oh, I like this. We decided Star Trek V was a hallucination they had on vacation. Probably doing a little too much LDS.
Doing too much LDS back in the 60s.
So.
Or back in the 80s.
LDS marshmallows. Star Trek VI, the apology for Star Trek V. I like it.
A video on historical naval officer names that would never be used in fiction. For example, Captain Manly Power. Is that a real name? I've never heard of that name. That would work. That would work. So Wright says we could do an episode on Wing Commander and why it's a hidden gem. I think I did that episode. In fact, I'm positive I did that episode. I did a Wing Commander episode.
Feral Historian did a Wing Commander episode that was pretty good too.
I did not know that.
Yes, he did.
He's somebody else that I need to go through his body of work. There's a lot to mine there.
Yeah.
I've always said that the big picture plot in the Wing Commander movie was perfectly fine. I love the big picture plot. There is a lot of problems with execution, but all the problems are at the low level, not at the macro level. Yeah, Olive says there's a FASA Starfleet battle thing where if it's got ground pounders, they call it a frigate. Yeah, a frigate is basically, for some reason in the FASA universe, a frigate is basically a cruiser with a troop complement, which it doesn't speak to me, but I don't have a problem with it per se, as long as they're consistent about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because...
But it doesn't speak to me. It's like, yeah. Where does... Okay. Sure.
Yeah. I had even thought through, how a lot of times, FF for frigate and stuff like that, or DD for destroyer. So you got a little 2-letter, 3-letter identifier that kind of tells you something about the ship. Whereas maybe the first letter is something along a hull size classification. The second one or third one would, or both, would imply some sort of mission.
Yeah,
focus for it. I've actually got it written out on some PowerPoint slides.
We should do a show on that.
Well, we could do that.
So Thomas the Cat says I should get Chris Kempschel on the show. I'm not even sure who that is.
I do not know.
Yeah. Then he says, author Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, which I know you don't do Star Wars, but it's a great book, and Chris is a scholar of World War I. Okay, all right, I should. Okay.
Oh, if he was a scholar of World War I, he probably ran it through the sci-fi converter to a degree, or maybe ran Star Wars through the real world converter.
World War I is very interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is. And then you didn't have those annoying airplanes mucking around your naval combat and stuff. So.
Yes. Okay, let's see.
And probably the submarines, I don't believe were good enough to really muck around against the ships too often, were they? Aside from stumbling on somebody.
No, the problem, World War I submarines usually attacked on the surface.
Yeah.
They could sneak into convoys, but frequently it was just basically a way to avoid getting spot during the day, and then at
Yeah.
night you do your attacks and you do them on the surface, unless you're going after like a merchant ship, in which case you'd probably surface next to it and man your deck gun.
Yeah. Well,
you might shoot torpedoes at it, but the torpedoes were just short range and problematic, and so you would generally you'd use torpedoes against ships in convoy.
Yeah, but at the beginning, I believe they would surface and offer them the opportunity to survive the departure of their ship before they sunk it. And then,
yes.
And then when the Brits were like, well, screw you, we're going to shoot back at you, then the Germans no longer offered people the opportunity to survive. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and somebody pointed out that in yesterday's Enterprise, there's troops on the Galaxy class.
Yep, they said a complement to like 5,000 troops, which on the Galaxy class would be sort of the evacuation limit on the ship or something like that. So
they camp in the Arboretum or something.
Yeah. So
I do want to talk at some point about CJ Cherry's Alliance Union universe, where she's got something called a carrier, but it's a sui generis ship. It carries 1,000 troops and 4 riders, which are, for our purposes, the closest analog would be torpedo boat. Although they are torpedo boats with very, very high performance, much higher than relative to the ship than regular torpedo boats. And carriers are incredibly fast in that universe because they've got big ass engines. But I make the argument that her ships are basically sui generis. They're called carriers, and they have naval ranks.
Perhaps you should explain that clever word to the rest of the audience and myself.
You don't all speak Latin? So I forget exactly how it translates in how the literal Latin is, but it basically means it's in and of itself. It's not really derived from anything else. It's its own thing. And so, like, her carriers aren't like World War II carriers with the serial numbers filed off. They're called carriers, but her navies don't feel like the US Navy. They don't feel like a Navy just done in space. The carriers don't feel like just carriers done in space. The riders are kind of torpedo boat-ish, but with enough differences that they're not. And so it's a rare instance of, in her universe, frequently the right answer is to sort of like figure out what the analog of something is, and then use your knowledge of the analog to gain an understanding of the thing that you're looking at, and then build from there. There's really not a good analog for the stuff in her universe. She started with a clean sheet of paper. Even though she calls them lieutenant commander and captain and ensign and lieutenant, and calls it a carrier. But other than that, it's its own thing. Sui generis means one of a kind is the literal interpretation.
Okay.
So good for Olive for coming in and saving the day on knowing Latin. I took Latin in high school, but I don't specifically remember that term, obviously. So we've reached the end of the questions. We're at the 2-hour mark. In classic fashion, what usually ends up happening, one of the things I've noticed is, like, we were at a little over the hour mark, I think, when we started questions, and then the questions sort of went on for a long time. So questions, and I love doing the questions, don't get me wrong, but it's like every time I look at it and go, like, we're going to finish close to on time, it's like, nope, we got questions. So Lissa, are you there?
Yes.
Hello, Lissa.
Hello.
I thought it would be worthwhile to have all three of us on the screen because we're getting ready to call it a night. So since we've all been here since episode 1, episode -1 or -2, in the case of Alyssa and me, it was definitely good to do a 200th anniversary. I keep saying anniversary, 200th episode retrospective. And like I said, I want to put some stuff up to like a survey or something like that to get people's ideas about where I can go with this. A lot of it is, I need to do some of the basic marketing type stuff to try to let more people know about this show. Feel free to tell your friends. If we get enough people that it makes sense to like do things like a Discord server and stuff like that, I'll do it. But I want to make sure that there's a there. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, for spending your Saturday night with me and Pat and Lissa. As always, I'm incredibly pleased that people are willing to come and hang out and listen to us talk and participate in the conversation. Wright says he's been enjoying the show since episode 1. That's fantastic. So with that in mind, everybody, thank you very much and see you next time.
Later, guys.